Hey everybody, welcome back to Mac Kiteboarding, or maybe we should say Mac Foiling, Mac E-Foiling. Here we are. Today we're going to talk to you about your first session and your setup for your foil drive Generation 2. But I guess a lot of these tips would also apply to the Assist Plus. But just going over some stuff that we wish we would have known when we first started foil driving, first started setting up these units that can really help you get to the water faster, not cause any damage to your unit, and get out there your first sessions and have some success, have some fun. All right, so let's get into it. First thing, foil drive comes in the mail. You're amped. Yep. Excitement's at level 11. Yep. So you're gonna run down to the beach with your stuff and try to assemble it and quit getting the water there. Don't do it, man. Stay at home. Yep. You know, go somewhere where you can keep track of screws and stuff like that. Get a clean area.
Make sure you have some time too.
Yeah, don't have any kids around or dogs that are gonna eat your screws. Yep. Things like that. Sit down in a clean area, chill out, realize this is something technical to put together. There's ways you can do it wrong. And follow the instructions on the assembly video for your specific unit. So we'll work on some of that support material, but Foil Drive has some really great videos on YouTube that walk you through that stuff from start to finish. So if you can cue that up on a phone, on a computer, and follow along, pay attention to the screw sizes, the specific cones for the adapters, you know, all that stuff makes all the difference between doing it right and having fun in a half hour, we'll say. Yep. Or doing it all wrong and being screwed until you can get replacement parts. Yep. No pun intended on the screwed part, but it's definitely potentially, you know, easy to switch up the screws and get it wrong or get a little too excited and just put things together incorrectly. So you'll want to definitely pay attention to that.
I'd go one step further and I would say I would even go through their quick assembly guide before you even open anything up.
Sure.
Get familiar with what you're going to see before you open it up and start tearing into things, and then follow along with the longer video with it. Yeah. Because I didn't do that. Cole's helped me set it up. He went through the video, and I've set up a lot of foils. You've set up a lot of foils. There's some little different intricacies with the foil drive that you want to kind of have a little familiarity with it that you're not going to have from other foils.
For sure. Yeah, it's definitely those things too you get really excited about and you can rush to the water. I've done it before with foils and done it wrong. I almost did it with the foil drive first time out and then realized something wasn't quite right because I was going slow, putting the screws in and realized, you know, this isn't
the right one.
This isn't the right one. I better back it out and double check. And sure enough,
same
I was putting in a screw that was this long when it needed to be this long. Yep. You know, that could have potentially caused damage to the unit and caused me not to be able to ride without replacement parts. So just paying attention to that, going slow, reading through the literature, how it works, how to use the different modes, how to set all the details, so you can get out there and have some fun. When you're putting together the screws, remember, a lot of these are threaded into stainless steel inserts that are embedded in plastic. So this isn't a really robust machine steel piece or something. You know, they just need to be firm. The little tiny screwdriver thing that they put in there is plenty of torque. You know, don't put that bit in a drill and just, because you'll just wreck it. Yep. You want to be careful, thread them in. When you feel like it's firm, that's enough. Just stop, don't overdo it. It's better to be under torqued than over. You know, it's definitely something we've seen happen in the past is people over torquing screws or using a drill and just ripping the insert out.
And then it's ruined.
Yeah, and that's ruined. So it's definitely something that requires some finesse and don't go in there like a gorilla and tear it apart because it doesn't need to be super tight. It's mainly just set screws that are putting this thing together. So it's nothing that really needs to be torqued in. Yeah, like a lug nut or something like that.
I even left a screw out my first time out and didn't realize it.
Yeah.
And it held together just fine. So
we don't want to encourage anyone to do that, but yeah, pay attention and you don't need to really manhandle these things. You know, you can put it in with the strength of a toddler, and that's okay. Just don't overdo it because that's where bad things happen. So pay attention to that.
One thing we didn't mention earlier that we should have is make sure that you set this up on your board ahead of time with the set screws. Foil Drive provides track nuts that have set screws in them. It allows you to set up your foil on the board in the right position to set up those track nuts and lock them in the bottom of the board. So that way, when you put your foil drive unit on top of there and then your mast on top of the foil drive, it's a lot easier to get those bolts lined up just perfectly.
Yeah, correct. Because with some foils, they get a little thicker in the plate. They're not going to want to reach those screws, or at least not well. If you're not perfectly lined up, you know, they're not going to grab the screw right, or it could just slide that slightly out of the way. It's definitely something I realized. I ended up using some taller Stringfellow track nuts that just were easier to set up because I didn't use the set screw. But yeah, after using the set screw, that pushes the nut up where that screw can reach it more easily. You're not going to scoot it out of the way or screw up your pattern once you get it set there. So figure out where you think you want your mast, set it down, align those nuts. You can even use the little foil drive screwdriver to align the nuts in the hole, screw in the set screws, and then you should be ready to rock. And next time you go out, you'll know exactly where you were last time. So if you need to make adjustments, you can, or you just leave it in the same spot and you know you'll have the same experience once you get it honed in. So that's definitely one of the biggest tips, I would say, because the screws they give you pretty short by comparison of what you normally use in a foil, where they're going to stick out a little bit and you can kind of find the screw a little shorter than that until you raise that nut up. Beyond that, let's get into some of the details of, you already have it set up, because it's pretty straightforward watching those videos how to set it up. You're going to want to set some of the specifics of the remote control settings before you get out. One thing you want to pay attention to, I would say, is your throttle limiter. So it comes preset at 100 when you get it out of the box. Not everybody's going to want 100. In fact, I would say start a little lower. You can always level it up. It's really easy to do on the water. Again, you can watch the remote control overview video that shows you all the details for that. But for a throttle limiter, you're going to press down on the thumb throttle and then hit the power button once quick. Scroll down till you get to the throttle limiter setting, and you can set that anywhere from 0 to 100. I would say for lighter riders, especially on bigger boards and stuff, 75–80% is a nice starter, where it's not just going to fire you up onto foil, because this one does have a lot more thrust than previous models, almost like a full E-foil, where you're at 100 and you just rip on that throttle. You know, it can get you on foil pretty quick, especially if there's wave behind you, and it might be a little too much for a lightweight rider on bigger gear. If you're on smaller gear, you're a heavier rider, you know, I'd say go 90–95%. If you're on smaller gear, you know, probably 100%. You're going to need it all to get going.
So it depends on your experience level too a little bit.
Yep, depends on your experience, your weight, the conditions, you know, the gear you're riding is all a factor there. But when you're first learning, I think it's just a lot easier to pull a full trigger than trying to, you know, specifically engage a certain amount of throttle, because you're going to end up backing off too much, then go too much, and then, you know, it's easier just to pull a full throttle to a specific thrust.
For sure.
And then if you get into the app stuff right off the bat, you know, I wouldn't suggest any kind of a boost mode as a new rider. You want a more gradual acceleration. You don't just want a 0 to 100 in 2 seconds kind of thing when you're first riding. At least in my experience, I started off around 85 and then quickly leveled that up to 90, worked pretty well, and then eventually leveled it up to 95 as I was riding in some really choppy conditions with a small foil. And that worked really well. So anyway, that's that. Get your settings set up, you know, think through that and what you're riding. And when in doubt, I think it's better to be a little undergunned than too sensitive on the throttle. Beyond that, safety. So you got it set up, you're to the water, you got your settings set up. We're gonna get into the water and go do it.
Make sure your unit is off.
Yeah, turn your unit off. It's really easy to hit that trigger on accident, especially when you're fighting through short break. You know, the waves can hit the trigger, you can accidentally bump it, and that thing is upside down in the air before it gets deep enough, and that is dangerous. So you always want to treat the motor unit as if it's on, and it could spin at any moment, so don't put your head by it, don't put your hands by it, but also play it double safe. When the prop isn't in the water, when you're not on top of the board, motor should be off, the power should be off to the remote, and that's just playing it safe, making good habits, so that you don't do something stupid in a rush sometime, or something just happens and, you know, it's just bad luck. But always want to play it extra safe. I'd also add, use a leash. So always use a leash. Sure. I found I kind of like going a little longer than normal for that reason with the prop. I don't want to be really right next to the board when the unit is on and I fall. So I had a little leash extension about 2 feet onto my normal foiling leash, which is like 5 feet. Just getting the board a little further away from you when you fall, I think, is good practice. And of course, that's everybody's own decision to do what they want to do with that. But always want to wear a leash, because this is a foil board. It moves fast in the water, faster than you can swim when there's swell, especially when there's waves and swell. So I always want to remind everybody to use a leash, even though it is powered unit. You know, might not first thing might not be to use a leash, but I always want to encourage people to do that so that they don't end up in a bad situation, especially with how quickly you can get offshore with one of these. You can get a mile offshore and think you're good. I can just motor back in, and then you fall, and the board's
it's easy to put you in
to
positions.
foil off. 50 yards, like and that's just how those things go sometimes. But definitely play it safe. Wear flotation vest, impact vest. You know, if you feel inclined to do so, it's always a good decision. And helmet, blah blah blah. So there's that stuff. Beyond that, Hooker, what else have you learned as we've been riding these, testing these out?
For me, I wouldn't consider myself necessarily a prone foiler. I've got very minimal experience proning, so I went with a bigger board. Upsized my board, used about the same size foil that I would use, a little bit bigger than what I would use winging. And that worked great. Yeah,
I would agree. My first session, I went out with a downwind board and a paddle. I'm not a paddleboard guy usually. I'm more of a prone guy, but I wanted something to mount my camera on. And I wanted to test out the trigger mount for the foil drive. So I used a paddle, but a downwind board. So definitely bigger than I would normally ride proning. I noticed immediately that was the right call for me as a new foil driver, riding a new unit I wasn't familiar with, smaller foil, because the waves were decent size, so I didn't want a big foil. So I knew I was going to need a little bit more efficiency and a little bit more help from the board in terms of stability. And it would have been a lot harder prone, because you're going to have to motor in on your stomach and then get up and go pretty quickly in those choppy, messy, bigger conditions that I was in. So having more length from the board, more efficiency really, helped me if you're skipping off chop and kind of touching up, lifting off, touching down. And then also when you want to motor back out, you can motor back out on your knees or standing even, which makes it a lot easier than just laying down and motoring out, and lets you hook into waves a little more easily when you're already, in that kneeling or standing position. Sizing up your board, especially in terms of length, is a really good thing, and it gives you more real estate to stand on as well. I don't know if you had a similar experience, but I definitely found myself moving my stance forward.
And the
from
foil
where I would
back.
normally. So I mounted my motor a little further back, maybe 1.5 inches than I normally would with that same board. But I found myself even then moving even further forward in my stance, probably 3 to 5 inches from where I would normally foil as I was motoring, because you get so much thrust from the motor, and it gives you that extra lift that you need to hold down as you're motoring in, because you don't want to just nose up, because then the motor comes out and you just you want to keep the board level and planing and build speed, and then kick it up, knowing the motor is going to drop off, and do that quickly so that you don't have too much drag. You don't force the foil to climb too much. You climb levelly a little bit more, but having a longer board makes that easier, especially in choppy conditions. If you are starting with a smaller board, I would say definitely go out into some flat water first to practice. Figure out where you like your mast. It's probably going to be a few inches further back than normal. It's nice to have more board in front of your feet. If you're really loading the front of the board because you're trying to hold it down, you're going to pearl the nose on any little piece of chop. So that definitely helps with that in figuring out, the little things like your throttle limiter and if you want any boost on it or not. The first day you get it's not a macking awesome day on the water anyway. You might as well, take it out and have some fun in some flat water and figure it all out with a little less stress, a little less consequence, I guess. Both of us have spent a lot of time foiling throughout the years on multiple different ways, boat, wing, kite, surf, sup, whatever. And we've also e-foiled quite a bit. But this is kind of a different hybrid of that. For sure. It takes some figuring out, especially with your particular gear that you're riding. Challenging conditions get that much more challenging when you're learning something new. One thing I've realized, and this is more into the riding, is that to build speed, you want to release the board from the water. So you're going to kind of motor along with the board on the water, we'll say, but then you have so much drag, there's really a limit to the speed you can go, even on a downwind board. Your top speed is maybe 12, 13 miles an hour. just motoring with the board on the water that I found, in choppy, messy water anyway. So you want to get it to start to skip, remove that tension from the water. So you don't want to immediately try to rock it up and try to ride that thing up on the foil because you're not going to have enough speed. This is primarily for small foils or challenging conditions, but when you need to accelerate, either to make the foil lift or to catch a wave that's moving faster, getting that skipping is really going to help accelerate, because once you build that speed, the motors can compound the speed a little bit more, overcome that drag. And then you can lift off when you're ready just by leaning back and getting it to remove the water, or remove the motor from the water. We're talking, of course, with the motor closer to the board, not e-foiling. That's what I used really to catch these faster moving swells and on a smaller foil, you know, that didn't want to just immediately come onto foil. And then also that helps because you're lifting off when you want to. And we know there's a small margin of error if you're using it, you know, as a tow-in method and you're trying to foil without the motor in the water on the wave. Foiling around with this much margin for error in choppy, messy conditions is almost impossible.
Yeah.
So being a little further forward, letting the board plane, and then skipping it when you're ready to lift off, build that speed, and then you can just lean back once you have speed, and it's going to pop right onto foil really smoothly with momentum, so that you can really, you know, get ripping and get your momentum moving on the wave. That's something I really realized. You know, initially you think, man, this thing just has so much power, you can just rip the trigger and you're just gonna
e-foil right up. And
it'll go 25 miles an hour, 23 miles an hour, or whatever it is, but that's on foil. That's not with the board touching the water. And the downwind board definitely helps with that as well, if you're looking to have efficient speed and just efficiency on the motor in terms of battery life, and that I found was really useful.
What I found with the prone board was I was able to just ride, wait for a set, then I could ride through the trough, and then turn into the wave right in front of the wave that I wanted to catch. So that first one would pass me by, and that second one I'd be going full speed, and I'd get into it nice and early.
Yeah, almost like you're doing a downwind run, but with a prone board, and instead of paddling, you're using the foil drive for that. You kind of build that technique to do that, and you know, that's a different approach than riding and standing. You know, you just adapt for the board you're using and what the conditions, you know, throw at you, and what's going to work best there. So I would say this is the biggest thing to know. If you get a slim and you have a 28 volt battery, so the endurance battery rather than the performance, that's a lower voltage. It's not going to have as much thrust. It's more like the Assist Plus, but it's going to have a longer battery life because of that design and that setup. You're going to have the app. You're going to have to go into the app, change your settings for the 28 volt to tell it to run that, and plan for a minute, half hour to kind of familiarize yourself, downloading the app, getting it scanned in, adjusting that setting if you're changing from the 40 volt to the 28. If you just bought it as an endurance battery, 28 volt, it should come ready to run out of the box. But if you're using both, that is something that takes a minute to acclimate and kind of figure out how to do that and get it all set up where it can work seamlessly. I think that's some of the biggest stuff. I guess some things to avoid we could talk about, and this is sort of like general battery stuff. Don't overcharge your battery. Don't leave it full charge all the time. It's not good for the battery. It's not good for battery safety. Overusing the batteries, so if you're going out, charging the full, emptying it, and you do that 5 times a day, you know, you probably should buy a couple of batteries to do that so you can rest one battery. The battery chemistry likes to rest in between. It doesn't like to run hard, charge without a break. So to maximize the life of your battery, as with any batteries, you know, electric bike, e-foil, whatever, this all applies. Obviously, you don't want to touch the propeller. Duh. Additionally, people have asked, you know, can I fly with it? With the Assist Plus, they had the travel battery, which broke into 2 pieces that you could fly with. The Gen 2 is not going to be able to fly right now. It's something they're working on figuring out, but as of right now, all of the batteries in every model in the Generation 2 have too much capacity to be legal to fly, so know that. If you're planning on traveling, you know, it's something you're gonna have to ship rather than bring it on the airplane with you. So that's good to know getting into it. You know, if you're somebody that travels a lot, probably best to buy the Assist Plus with the travel bundle. That way you can travel around with it without worry. If you have the Gen 2, they're working on it, but nothing in the near future here. So, you have any other comments, any other ideas, Ron?
No, that's about it. Just make sure you take time when you get that unit. Don't get too excited to get right out there. Make sure you take some time, go through the videos, go through everything that comes in the kit.
And it's cool too, you know, you really learn more about the capability of the foil drive. There are a lot of things I definitely discovered. You know, I'd seen all the marketing stuff and all their stuff, but until I got it and started playing around a little bit, I really didn't realize how, you know, in depth they've gone with some of those settings and some of those neat little, you know, things that you can adjust and set is pretty neat with the boost and the throttle adjustment, and then also the cruise control is all stuff that, you know, has some really useful features. It's not just stuff that's kind of, oh yeah, who cares? It's definitely stuff that can level up your experience, make it easier, make it more fun. So, right on. Well, we're coming at you with more foil drive videos soon. There is a lot to say about these, so keep an eye out. We're still working on a review, still going through all the different models and batteries and really kind of torture testing them. And we're going to bring you guys a really in-depth review here in the near future so that you guys can really know which model is best for you. But for the most part, I'd say, you know, if you're interested in a foil drive, you really can't go wrong with the max endurance or the max power battery, I think they call it. The biggest model, most thrust, most life, because really the motor is really quite light. You don't really realize it under there. When in doubt, why not have less range anxiety, right? Like, you might only be going out for an hour, but maybe you decide you want to go out for 2 hours. Don't need to swap batteries. You can just stay out and do it. And really, I think that's going to be the most popular model by far. Cool. Well, we'll see you next time. If you guys have any questions at all, feel free to drop those in the comments section below. If you've been a foil driver for a while, if you have a Gen 2 that you're trying out, go ahead and put your own tips in the comment section below, and we'd love to learn from you as well. This has been Tucker at Matt Kite.
And Ryan.
And we'll see you next time.